I'm really excited to have Cecilia Berlim here today, talking about her journey, both spiritual and nutritionally, and to share a little bit about where she's from in Brazil and the challenges that are going on there. But as a 5-year carnivore who reversed her fibromyalgias, arthritis, Sjogren's, asthma, controlled her Hashimoto's, reversed refractory depression and memory and cognitive loss due to neuralgia and inflammation. And let's just get your story and tell us a little bit about your Cecilia, and we'll get into all these other diseases that so many have suffered from. And welcome.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this opportunity. It is always something that makes me very happy to talk about this health journey. And people sometimes might, think, oh, someone again talking about a journey, not that again. But it has been a health journey. And like you said, it's not just a health journey. It has been a physical and mental journey, but also. And I'm very thankful for you and everyone who's speaking out about carnivore and about plant toxins and about fat and how animal fat is so important. And this is something I've been learning later in carnivore. And you are greatly responsible for that, which is increasing the fat, the animal fat that I am taking. So thank you.
Tell me a little bit about where you're from and how you got into this space in the first place.
Okay. I'm originally from Porto Alegre, Rio Grande do Sul. It's the southeast state in Brazil. We're right next to Argentina and Uruguay, and we have the same microbiome where the cattle grazes here than Argentina, that's so famous for their meat quality. And I moved very early to Boston, Massachusetts. I had the opportunity to go to the United States, and this is how I learned my English. But it's been a long time that I've moved back, so I'm sorry for, not speaking so correctly. But so right now I'm back in Porto Alegre, and here we are having a very sad moment in history. We have the worst flood in history, and before anyone says these floods are cyclicals, they're part of nature, just like Grand Canyon has been ocean and desert many times, even before man, even before, animals here, hunting animals. And so this is part of a cycle. It's very sad and it's a difficult time. And I don't like the word difficult. I like the word challenge. So we're going through a big struggle here. People have lost their lives. People have lost their homes. But as a community, and Gaúchos, that's the people from here, we're called Gaúchos, we're very strong and we're sticking together and we're helping each other. I'm involved in volunteering, and I'm grateful for the carnivores in my Instagram and the meat community. We're getting together and we're helping everyone in need right now and trying our best. So this chapter will pass.
You've suffered for massive floods there that have decimated the farmlands and the cattle and other livestock and other farming.
Yes, I'm not posting videos of the tragedies on my Instagram. I'm posting on my stories asking for donations because I believe everyone has been a little bit overwhelmed with all these very sad videos and images. And I don't know if that is something that we need to be living and breathing all the time, but we need to be conscious of it. So animals have been taken by the waters and the seeds have been flooded also. So now not only it impacts when most of our cattle here is pasture raised. So the pasture is wet, but when they finish, they are given grains. So these grains are wet, and this will impact not only, food industry that depends on the grains, but also the meat and the milk, because the dairy is also fed on grains. And I'm just very glad that I know in my heart that this will pass and we'll get through this. And it's a reminder. It's funny because I'm correlating this situation here in our state with my health journey, because just like what's going on here, I've lost a lot with my nutritional choices in the past. I was 25 years vegetarian. I was 24 years vegetarian and 1 year vegan, and I lost my health. And I believe that sometimes, unfortunately, when we lose something that's very important, it is a big lesson. So maybe humans need to, go through some losses to really understand the importance. Like our state was, we didn't have any energy. We still don't have water. Most of us don't have
Wow.
drinking water. And I've seen, I have a teenager daughter, and I've seen her friends also speaking how it's such a luxury to take a bath. It's such a luxury to wash our hair. And I think that's a big lesson for them, especially them, these TikTok generation, to learn that these basic little things like having, meat in our plates is so
Yes.
important. We're trying to produce food for the people who lost their homes and who lost everything. And I was involved in this movement, and every single dish had animal protein, and I was so excited about that. I was really proud, because it is a luxury now, and it shouldn't be a luxury. This should be a staple, option for everyone. So
So what things did you suffer from physically, and we're going to put mentally too, although I think mental and physical
yes.
are really all the same. Tell us a little bit about your journey through a plant-based diet. What type of
Okay.
things were affecting you that then led you to change your mindset and your diet? And we're going to talk about faith and all those things in this conversation, I hope.
I hope so too. Um, When I was 8, we moved to United States. My mom went to do her doctoral degree, and I come from an academic family. My father is a physician. He's a teacher at the medical school here.
Mm.
And so I come from an academic family, and I would read a lot. I would study a lot. This was something that was part of our family culture. And when I moved to United States, my diet changed. So that's the first time that I think was really important to point out. In Brazil, things take a little longer to get here, third world country. So we didn't have McDonald's until the 90s. Our staple food is, and it still is, rice and beans.
Hmm.
It's changing now because industrialized food is so much cheaper. It's the supply is so much greater. So produce food is something that's becoming more expensive than industrialized food. And we're seeing now in Brazil things like you have there in the United States, that the poor communities will have, a very bad nutritional um, access to better foods, and obesity is growing, and all these health problems are growing. So when I moved to United States, I started to have, pizza from school lunch and tuna sandwiches and these jellos and all these things that I didn't have here. We would have rice and water, rice and beans, and we would drink water or sometimes juices, which is actually something people are saying right now during this flood, that people should hydrate with juices. And it just scares me that health professionals are saying that it's, so filled with sugar and anti-nutrients. But that's the first time that my health started changing. So I had digestive problems right then, just by going from a more natural food to a more industrialized food in the United States. And when I was 13, in the 90s, there people were already talking about, not eating animal food and animal
Mm.
fat being so bad. And I like to point out this animal fat part, because not only I stopped eating meat, but I stopped eating animal fat. And I went into that low fat, low
Hmm.
fat. I was still drinking some milk, some yogurt. So it was low fat yogurt. Everything had to be low fat, right? Philadelphia cream cheese, low-fat Philadelphia cream cheese. So those things went along, not only not eating meat, but also going low-fat. And in less than a year, it wasn't even 2 years, in less than a year, when I stopped eating meat and going low-fat, I had problems with my period. I started having asthma, and I started having what probably are called normal adolescent symptoms. And I always say this, I think common is one thing, normal is another. It is not normal for humans to suffer. It is not normal for humans to get sick. So I had common symptoms. 1 year, probably less, but definitely 1 year after not eating meat. So I was dancing a lot. I was a dancer, and people would say, well, you're not having your period because you're very skinny, or you're having acne because you're a teenager, and you're probably having asthma because you're anxious, because you're a teenager. All these things are changing in your body.
It was just normal. It was just normal, right? It was considered normal.
It was considered normal.
Yeah.
It was considered normal. And that's a type of gaslight when you tell someone, and I went through that a lot in my sickness journey, when people are telling you, don't worry, that will pass. It's normal to feel bad, or don't feel anxious that you feel bad. And it's not comforting. It's not helping. And it just makes the person that's sick feel even worse, because they're supposed to accept that disease symptom. And I believe they're disease symptoms. They're not normal symptoms.
I call it like poison ivy, where we have poison ivy, which isn't really a disease. It's a poisoning by a plant. And yes. I look at all of our diseases as simply poisoning by plants. That's the 99%. Plants and proteins are poisoning us. And it's as simple as that. Well, through your years, you had fibromyalgias, arthritis, Sjogren's, asthma, cognitive issues, Raynaud's syndrome. You had some cysts in your ovaries and all these things.
I had cysts everywhere. Anywhere doctors would poke me, anywhere I would get an exam, I would have a cyst. And I believe they were inflammatory, but also oxalates. So this is something that I learned afterwards, going on Carnivore and trying to understand, how did I get so sick and why I was feeling better, was I learned anti-nutrients. And I agree with you. These toxins, these neurotoxins that they go through, blood-brain barrier. And that's why I also lost cognitive, and I had this persistent depression. These cysts were, I believe, mostly oxalates. And my joint pain, when I was 16, we came back to Brazil, and I came back on a wheelchair, and I had knee surgery, and nothing was conclusive. And I later reading and finding studies that show, and reading about other people, and it's so important to relate to all these other stories, also these N1 experience, these anecdotal people going through similar situations, is that my first arthritis symptom was my knee pain. It was a limitation. I was told I would never ride a bike again. And on Carnivore, I'm riding a bike, I'm running. So I would have, I think these oxalates were depositing. And so I started, at 13, increasing my plant ingestion. And then 16 years old, I'm having this arthritis pain, and I believe it were oxalates. So they bind to calcium, and they bind to all these nutrients, and they make literally these crystals that stick to our body, and they go through our lymphatic, and they cross these blood-brain barriers, or all these other barriers. So my knee pain was the first pain I experienced, and it started going everywhere. And I had cystitis. Is that how you call it in English? Cystitis?
Cystitis. Yep. Interstitial cystitis is the most common problem that women, and then vaginitis, vaginosis, pelvic pain.
And then and you're told, you're looked at, as a woman, it's kind of embarrassing because when you talk to doctors, they say that's related to, sexual intercourse, that's related to whatever, a lot of sex and I was a teenager. I wasn't doing all that. And I actually would have sometimes bleeding, cystitis with bleeding. And now I know it's from oxalates because even when I did, before I went carnivore 5 years ago, and I was taking pharmaceuticals, chemotherapy, monoclonals, trying everything out, trying my hardest. I tried paleo and I was still eating plants with oxalates and I was still having cystitis and all these other symptoms, fibromyalgia, and I still had arthritis. And those were the things we were trying to treat with immune suppressants. And the moment, and that is one of the best feelings on carnivore, is I know I am not going to have cystitis again, ever on carnivore. And I'm not going to bleed. I'm not going to have pain. And that's from just one symptom of one disease. I'm not talking about all the other symptoms.
What was the inspiration that pushed you from a plant-based to an animal-based to the carnivore side?
Okay. I came back. I was living in São Paulo. I was driving down. I had all these inflammatory diseases for a whole year. They were catching up. The more sick I got, the harder I tried to be a good vegetarian. So I became a vegan. And that's, the path that you try just harder because you are blamed. The victim is blamed. You're not doing it correctly. You're not trying so hard. So I was making my own bread, my own fermentation. I was soaking my seeds. I was, doing everything that you're told that you're probably not doing right. And it's so hard to do it right because there is no right. You're just taking in more toxins and more toxins. And that's when I had my worst cognitive losses that were starting when I was a teenager. I had a hard time reading and remembering, but then it got really worse. So I was driving down this road, Marginal Pinheiros, and I was holding onto the steering wheel and I didn't know where I was going. I didn't know my name. I didn't know how to go back home. And I had an episode. And later we did exams and I had a neurological function loss, which I am recuperating on carnivore. And it was probably due to the inflammation from these neurotoxins in plants and this high inflammation, this cytokines and, high glutamate and all these things that were happening in my body due to becoming a more strict vegetarian and later a vegan. So I had to come back home to Porto Alegre for my parents and to take care of my daughter. I couldn't take care of her. I couldn't cut her food. I couldn't brush her hair. She was little. And that's when I arrived in Porto Alegre. And I went to this doctor, this neurologist doctor, and he told me, I was actually, at that moment, I was juicing. I was drinking my vegetables raw, which is I think the worst thing you can do. And I just think of all these oxalates and these goitrogens. My thyroid was just havoc. It was the worst time of my thyroid because I was drinking all these kales and raw broccolis that make no sense. And they taste horrible, but we convince ourselves that you're supposed to do that. So this doctor told me, you are sick and you need to get better and you have to eat meat. It's not an option. And because I have my daughter and because and this is the first time I actually prayed to God. I don't think I ever prayed before in my life like I did because I was dying. I was put on morphine because nothing was working. I had such strong pains and I couldn't get out of bed that I was put on morphine therapy, which is something really sad because it's the end of the road. Like, we don't have anything else to do for you. We'll just give you morphine. So I think this anguish, this desire to live, and I prayed to God. I cried and I prayed to God. I need to find a path. And this doctor tells me you need to eat meat. So in desperation, I ate meat. And that was a very humbling lesson, because I spent 25 years saying I will never eat meat again. And I was given this opportunity to, to eat meat. So I took it. And I did feel a little bit better because I decreased the amount of plants and I started eating meat. But even though I tried paleo for a couple of years, I was still on medications. I was still taking oral chemotherapy. I was still taking monoclonals, and it wasn't really changing the switch. I was still sick. I was still having pain, and I was a little bit better, but I wasn't, reversing anything. And then I lost my kidney function, probably due to the medication. I don't know exactly, but if it was the plants and the medication.
Were you taking the medications for which disease were you in the monoclonal treatments? And
for asthma and arthritis, because they were really bad. And I was also taking cortisone, and I was also taking a lot of pain medication, and I was taking a neuroprotective medication for my neuroglia. Is that how you call it in English? So it was an Alzheimer medication. And my thyroid medication, my hormone for my thyroid, was just, we were taking it up and up and up, and it wasn't taking care of the Hashimoto. And I was still having episodes. I have a palsy episode where half of my face was paralyzed for 3 days when I was on paleo, because I was still eating plants. So I had an allergic. I had high histamines reactions. And it can be from anything from an anaphylactic, shock to just, having digestion problems and breathing problems and rashes. So you also get diagnosed for MCAS. And I don't think I have MCAS. You get all these diagnoses, and they're naming these symptoms, but they're not looking at the root cause. And now I know the root cause were plant toxins.
How was it for you when you first started adding meat? What was your psychology, your mental state at the time? Was it hard to sort of venture into that? And did you sort of somehow begin to feel, whoa, there's something in this that makes me feel better?
I'm a little bit ashamed to say that I was very immature, because the first time I ate meat, I feel like I was a little bit of an adolescent. I told myself, I am not going to like this. I am not going to like this. But I really enjoyed it. The first time I took a bite, I have to admit, it was very satisfying. And all these, receptors in my body were saying, thank God you're eating this. And all this energy from the fat. I had picanha, which is a cut from barbecue here from churrasco, and it's a prime meat. It's not something I have all the time. And right now I feel that meat from, meat with bones and bone broth with, even if you, sometimes you can afford just, ground meat, it's fine. It's wonderful. But at the first time I ate picanha, and it was very satisfying. It was, like I told you, it was humbling. How could I do this to my body? How could I spend so much time not having this, and having this speech that, you tell yourself over and over that vegetables taste good, but they don't. and believing all these myths that they're good for you. So I started to question. It's a little bit scary, because when you tell yourself a story for so long, and then suddenly you realize that you have been lied to, and that you were lying to yourself, it is a very happy feeling to find a new path, but it's also a sad feeling that you have to say goodbye to all these things that for so long you believed, and so long you trusted. So it's a little strange. It is.
And you've been carnivore now for a little over 4 years, 5 years or so.
5 years.
What was the switch that said, okay, enough of plants? Where was the inspiration, and how did you feel?
So that was when I was in my second year of monoclonals, and I had 1/4 of my hair right now that I have my hair now, and I still had aches and pains and limitations, and I was trying my best. And I was told I was stage 4 on kidney loss. So the prognosis were that if I kept going with medication and the way I was, that I would be on dialysis or, some kind of treatment like that. And I didn't want that. So that was the second time that I really prayed. And I said, what the heck? I'm trying so hard. I'm going through all these things. I was hospitalized. I was taking, blood samples every week. And now I have, on top of all that, I'm having kidney loss. What's going on? And that week, I found out about Mikhaila Peterson. And my brother sent this video of Joe Rogan speaking to her father, Jordan. Yes, Jordan Peterson. I like him a lot. And he spoke about Mikhaila, and I went after her. I went on the internet and I tried to find out more about her. And I read her story, and it sounded so much of what I was going through, my physical and mental aches. And I said, what am I going to lose? The doctor, my nephrologist, told me, I am not, I'm not going to say you should do this. I'm going to say you shouldn't do this.
Wow.
And I never went back. I've never went back to his office. I left his office and I said, I don't have anything to lose. I'm just going to try this. And I did. I woke up May 1st, 5 years ago, and I said, I'm going to do carnivore. And this is what I did for the last 5 years.
And tell us about the healing that you felt and the diseases that have just fallen by the wayside.
Yes. So very, very short after, 2019, there weren't a lot of people speaking about it, carnivore, and I was off social media. And I think it's something that can be very good to a lot of people, but it is a place where you can get a lot of information. So I went back to social media, and I found at the time Paul Saladino and Strong Sisters, Ashley, and they were doing carnivore, and there weren't that many people. Some people here in Brazil. And I started to learn a little bit because you want to understand, but it's very intuitive. It's very different from being a vegetarian or a vegan. You don't need to soak things or sprout or ferment. You don't need to peel. I didn't even know. I wouldn't touch meat in the beginning. I didn't, in the beginning, it's hard. You're not used to it. And I didn't know how that some people clean the meat. They take out the fat, they trim the meat. I never did that because I didn't know you were supposed to do that. So from the beginning, I was just getting meat and cooking it. And that's how I started carnivore. I didn't know better. I knew I couldn't have milk. I can't have dairy. So I had to find some way to have fat with my carnivore. And this is something I've learned later. So I make my own tallow, and I bake with tallow, and I eat tallow. And people think I'm crazy. I'm just eating tallow. So the first benefits I saw was my energy was up. I didn't have aches. My limitations were coming down. So if you have arthritis, or if you have Hashimoto, hypothyroidism, when you wake up in the morning and your body's cold, you wake up already with aches. And when your feet touch the ground and they feel the cold ground, even if it's summer, they touch the ground and your feet ache. I used to have Raynaud also. That's another syndrome I had, Raynaud syndrome. And so 15 days, I would say, into carnivore, I would wake up and I would take my feet off my bed and I would step on the floor and I wouldn't feel aches. And a month after being on carnivore, I think, I realized I could read like I couldn't read in a long time. I could read a book. I wasn't reading a book in a long time. And I could remember what I read, which was also even greater than being able to read. So it was a physical thing, and it was a mental thing, and it was an emotional thing.
Dr. Rob Kiltz, another beautiful, spectacular day. And I just want to send thanks to all of those for watching the newest episode of Carnivore Conversations. Be sure to follow us on Spotify, Apple Music, and other streaming platforms to gain access to the full 1-hour episode. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more to come. God bless.